In automation, there are many times you would want to store data for a prolonged period of time. In n8n, there are a few ways you could do this. The most easy and most accessible way of doing this is with the built-in data tables in n8n. But there are better ways to do it. For example, using Google Sheets inside of n8n offers a much more scalable uh, and secure data storage option for anybody using n8n. You could also get away with using SQL databases like MySQL, etc. But for simplistic purposes, a data sheet is often really useful. Now, I've set up a simple data sheet where you have a name, an email, a message, and a date. And here I've built a simple function where you can where you can send a message into the chat, and it will save the message into the sheets, and then this schedule trigger will 5 days later send it to you via Gmail. Because of course, who wouldn't want a system to remind you what you said to an arbitrary chatbot 5 days ago. This is for tutorial purposes. However, it isn't extremely useful, but it does teach you most basics you would need to know. So here, as you already know, is a chat trigger node, which triggers this workflow when I send a message into the chat. Here I have set a few datas. I have set using the set node a few data variables that I will use um to input into my data sheet. For example, the date, which is the now variable, which is stored by default inside of n8n. The name, which is a string stored as John, and then email as a string, which is an arbitrary email I chose, with the message being the chat input, which you know this will automatically output when you input a message into the chat. And then the important part is the append row in sheet. There are a few things, a um few data modules that happen that you can choose in Google Sheets, including a few triggers. For example, on row added, on row updated, on row added or updated. These are quite useful when you have a system where you have to trigger a workflow whenever somebody adds a row or something adds a row. And then there's create a spreadsheet, which creates a spreadsheet which you would name. It's quite simple. Create, you give it a title, and you add the items inside of the sheet. So the sheets. So as you know, a sheet can have multiple storage sheets. So there you just add a sheet and you can choose what happens with that sheet. Then there is the delete spreadsheet, which is also quite self-explanatory. The update, append or update row in spreadsheet. It functions exactly like the append row in sheet, except for one difference. If the data were to match, then it would update the row instead of add a new row. So that could also be useful sometimes. Then the append row in sheet, which we have here. The clear sheet, also self-explanatory. It clears a specific uh, sheet of your choosing. Create a sheet. It's basically like creating a spreadsheet, except you already have a spreadsheet and it will just add an extra one at the bottom, like this, for example. Then there's delete sheet, also self-explanatory, deletes one of these, like that. And you just have to input the name. Delete row or columns from the sheet. We will get into that later. And then the update row in sheet, you give it information it has to match and it will update the rest. I'll give you an example from the document tutorial. Sheet 1, you select a column which it has to match. Row number is usually the most robust and useful, but you could match it on any type. You could even have a separate ID row for each one, so you would not get confused with any states. Then there is so you could just update a row or a row that matches the values given. Then there's the delete rows, which takes in a row or a column number and deletes a specific amount of rows assigned to it. What this does here is it finds the. So I'll explain. So this saves the message. So here it saves the message and the date and the name and the email of the person who uh, of the variables we set, and it saves it as a new row into the spreadsheet. So if you type into chat, then it would add that information into the spreadsheet. Here I have a schedule trigger, which triggers every 1 day at midnight. A really useful time to be receiving emails from an automated system. Then here it gets the rows in the sheet and checks if. So I'll explain this a bit more as it is quite difficult to understand. It uses the date of the spreadsheet it has gotten. So it will go and receive the date here. Then it uses that date. It uses that date to check if that date is before now minus 5 days. So if it is before, meaning 5 days has passed. So and then you send the message. So it checks if that is the case, if 5 days have passed, and if it hasn't, then it would just skip over this. And then it sends you the message, and then it deletes the row for where the data is stored. So in this case, row 2 will be deleted as it receives the row from the get rows in sheet. And deletes one row. It is recursive, so make sure you don't delete your entire database because you accidentally added more than one row there, and those are the basic nodes you would use in n8n for Google Sheets. Thank you for watching.